So impacts of substance abuse on young people need to be taken seriously because these can affect physical health, they can affect your psychological needs or your behavior needs on a short-term basis. So physical health-wise, these substances are stimulants, so they can trigger things like seizures, which is commonly known as epilepsy. They can trigger things like cardiac health problems because what happens is when you take substances, you get palpitations, your heart ticks off up and down. It can cause mood problems, so you can feel really depressed because they are sedatives. And for people who inject substances, you can get blood-borne viruses if you share needles. These can be HIV. We know that people can pick up HIV through that. We know that people can pick up Hep C through that. Psychological impacts can cause things like craving for drugs. These can lead to addictions to these drugs. They can cause memory loss, short-term and long-term. And they can also cause psychosis. They can trigger psychosis. So when people use substances, they can hear voices that are not there. They can see things that are not there. This is psychosis, but also behavior-wise, they affect your motivation. So somebody who uses drugs becomes very slow at doing things, loses motivation. If you're in education, you struggle with just waking up to go to classes. You struggle with your education, with your reading, with catching up with what is going on in class, but also with your daily activities. And these impacts can seriously affect your lifestyle in a whole, but they can also affect your mood. So somebody who uses drugs can become angry very, very fast, which we call impulsive. Sometimes they do not think through things before they react. Obviously, this can lead to aggression sometimes, but also it can lead to tearfulness, being unhappy and being sad. Now, how can we help young people who are suffering with substance abuse or who are vulnerable to substance abuse? Evidence has shown that having open conversations with young people about drugs is important. Drug awareness sessions. Because it's noted that most young people start using drugs by attempting to taste alcohol, attempting to smoke cigarettes, and they take that lightly, not knowing that these substances are addictive. So for those young people who are vulnerable to taking drugs, my first advice is do not try because it's not worth it. But if you are in that predicament, it's about sharing and having open conversations about impacts of drugs and alcohol on young people. The problem is once we start using, it is very difficult to get out of it. You will need things like talk therapies. CBT, known as cognitive behavior therapy for drugs, is very good for that. But also young people have reported that shared experiences from other young people who have used substances are useful. They're useful to them because they learn from those people. So we need to be able to openly have conversations about impacts, what it causes to these young people. Some young people are struggling financially. The lifestyle they live leads them to the predicaments that they are in. How can the government put systems in place where young people are supported not to fall prey of using substances, of selling drugs? How can schools work in partnership with drug and alcohol practitioners who are trained to do it and give the right, support to these young people who have fallen prey of using substances, because most of them are actually just being used by the top people to sell these drugs. And in the long run, they end up using these drugs. Most young people talk about boredom at home, and they end up indulging and getting involved in situations like this. How do we ensure as young people that we focus on what's important and ignore what's not important? Advice to parents out there on how we can have a drug-free population for young people. We might never have a drug-free population because, as we know that a long time ago, drugs used to be alcohol, cannabis, cocaine, and heroin. But now, every year, we get a different category of drugs. We've got spices on the market, legal highs on the market, amphetamines, methamphetamines, ecstasy. Drugs are coming in every form. So we might never have a drug-free environment, but how do we support our children not to fall prey of that problem? Because it is a public health issue. One advice I have for parents, I am a parent myself. The most difficult conversations to have with our children are around drugs and sex, but yet they're the most important conversations to have in life. So seize a moment as a parent. It could be a program on TV. It could be when you're giving medication for malaria to your child and you say to them, "Oh, do you know that there's illegal drugs out there?" Then you start talking about it. Be open and honest about the conversation you're having. Exposure to your children. Some environments at home have bars. You visit a house and they have an open bar. It's not contained. It's not managed by anybody. And children in that household are allowed to drink alcohol. We need to look at what we are exposing our children to. Some people have seizure at home and they smoke it in the presence of their children without a problem. You are exposing them to these things. Make your children's environment protective so that they can feel safe in that environment. As a parent, most of our children start using drugs in school. Work in partnership with the schools. Make it a point to know what is going on in school with your child. Network with her or him. Know their circles. Know their friends. Know the background of the families that they relate to. There's this thing about balancing negative and positive approaches to parenting. Some parents just buy children expensive gadgets and just leave them at home. They do not look after their emotional well-being. Sometimes a child does something wrong and is awarded by, buying them a new mobile phone. We are throwing so much money to our children that when they get in school, this is the same money they're using to buy drugs. So balance your negative and positive reinforcements when it comes to parenting. Make it your point to know, even if your child is in a boarding school, what they've got with them when they come home. Understand issues around mental health and substance abuse. Make yourself knowledgeable about symptoms. If your child is behaving in an odd manner, is that just behavior or is there something more going on? So as parents, we need to be alert. We need to be aware. We need to change our parenting skills. We need to focus on being parents other than making our children best friends. We need to be able to be balanced in a way. It is not an easy topic when it comes to drugs and alcohol. And it's a topic that is shunned, like I said, but it's a topic that is very important in the lives of our children.